I will bless those who bless you.
The Anarcho-Christian Podcast, evaluating the relationship between the Christian and the state.
Give us a king to rule us when you're gone. His life's work had been to help the people understand it's not the role of a man to rule over other men.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the show. Today I would like to talk about a few different phrases we hear in our church political discussions. The name of this episode is simply God's Nation, and we are not just going to address the different opinions out there on who or what is God's nation, but also get into the directly related topic of God's people. The people thing directly follows the nation topic if it isn't used synonymously. So I'm going to do my best to reference everything you've heard while trying to navigate things like someone being against foreign aid, but supporting billions of dollars going toward Israel. Also, I'll try to navigate the head scratcher of thinking that Israel and the United States are both God's nation and or people, even if that apparent contradiction isn't realized. The rhetoric is very similar between Israel and the United States. But generally, the official title of God's nation is given to Israel. And have you ever presented this to a friend or family member when they are in the middle of repeating political rhetoric of the United States being God's chosen nation? But wait a minute, I thought that was Israel. It's generally a quick dismissal, but there is a very real issue with these biblical terms and our political rhetoric. And we've been able to ignore the contradictions through our nationalism and our tribalism. This can get a little scattered. Let me try to get this as organized as possible. Addressing the confusion between Israel and the, quote, Christian nation of the United States is one thing, but there's actually an even deeper meaning at the heart of all of this. Much like a few other topics we've tried to work through, we are going to also look at the greater issue here. While your religious family is being stumped by, or maybe arguing about, Israel or America being God's people and nation, I'd like to propose they are both wrong. And I'd like to ask a more pressing question. It's something I always ask when this is brought up that cuts straight to the point. We need to answer this question. Who is Israel? Seems simple, right? It's a nation in the Middle East that's most recent incarnation began in 1948. It's primarily populated by Jewish people and has land rights dating back to biblical events. The simple answer, no, that is not correct. At least it's not correct in the context that we are asking this, the context of God's nation or God's people, biblically. Who is Israel is asking who is God's nation and or who are God's people from a biblical perspective, because the Bible is where we originally find these terms and answers. If I haven't lost you yet, but you're wavering, let me preemptively put a few concerns to rest. This is not in any way going to be an anti-Semitic discussion. I despise racism of any type and hold no ethnicity above or below another. This also isn't going to be a silly conspiracy theory video that explains lost tribes or bloodlines. The truth of the matter is much more simple. But it may be shocking because it will change many assumptions that you may have grown up with. So if you're not familiar with who Israel really is, buckle up. We are about to explore the Bible in a way that may seem new to you, but the clarifications are as old as the apostles' writings. So, all the questions about who is God's nation or God's people is answered in who is Israel. So let's jump right into that. Once we get that, questions about blessings, foreign policy, land rights, Jews and Gentiles all become very easy to answer. First and foremost, Israel is a faith. It is not an ethnicity, nor a geopolitical state. It is a faith. I recently went over the definition of faith in episode 63, No King But Christ. But let's go over it again. Hebrews 11:1 tells us, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." In short, faith isn't just the belief that God exists. It is the belief in God's promises, His promises to save and redeem His people. As Christians, our faith is specifically in Christ as the fulfillment and culmination of God's promises. But how is Israel a faith and not an ethnicity or a geopolitical state? If you haven't heard the phrase Israel is a faith, you may have heard the synonymous terms true Israel or spiritual Israel. Either way, we'll keep our definition of faith in mind as we encounter the following Bible verses that lay out exactly who Israel is and how I gave you the definition of it being a faith. The book of Galatians was written by Paul, and in the 3rd chapter, he really drives home justification through faith. In doing that, we start to see these distinctions stand out. From Galatians 3, verses 7 through 9, "Know then that it is those of faith who are the sons of Abraham. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, 'In you shall all the nations be blessed.' So then, those who are of faith are blessed along with Abraham, the man of faith." And verses 25, 26, and 29, "But now that faith has come, we are no longer under a guardian. For in Christ Jesus you are all sons of God through faith. And if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise." Romans was also written by Paul, and throughout it, he is making the case of who is Israel, for Jews and Gentiles alike, and what that means. We will just take them in order as they appear in the book. So Romans chapter 2, verse 28 and 29, "For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical. But a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. His praise is not from man, but from God." In chapter 4, Paul is again making this distinction between faith and adherence to the law, starting with verse 13 and reading to 16, "For the promise to Abraham and his offspring that he would be heir of the world did not come through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. For if it is the adherents of the law who are to be the heirs, faith is null and the promise is void. For the law brings wrath, but where there is no law, there is no transgression. That is why it depends on faith, in order that the promise may rest on grace and be guaranteed to all his offspring, not only to the adherent of the law, but also to the one who shares the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all." He goes on further to explain in more detail this idea of Abraham's faith and offspring. But let's jump to chapter 9, verse 6 through 8, because he really sums it up there. "But it is not as though the word of God has failed. For not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel, and not all are children of Abraham because they are his offspring. But through Isaac shall your offspring be named. This means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, but the children of the promise who are counted as offspring." All right, what do you think? You might be thinking, this seems plausible, but there are a ton of things we need to work through. Evangelicalism, over the last 100+ years, has been teaching that Israel isn't a faith, and that it is specifically a people group and a portion of land. And along with this teaching comes some pretty convincing Bible misinterpretations. I think the United States references to all this stuff is really weak and easily seen as just typical nationalism that has successfully disguised itself in Christianity. The Civil War is a good example, with its imagery of God's army fighting for God's purposes. Of course, this is prior to the turn of the 20th century. It's at that point dispensationalism starts to become the dominant theological teaching in the United States. Generally, dispensationalism dates back to John Nelson Darby, but it really becomes legitimized and popularized through Cyrus Scofield. And it just picks up steam as the years go by after that. It really becomes solidified in the national or collective Christian understanding after World War II, when we see a massive persecution of Jewish people, the destruction of their persecutors, and their reoccupation of Palestine in 1948. The Scofield Reference Bible was first published in 1909 and is still available and popular today. There are many different views and positions to consider in dispensationalism, but the primary teaching and the center of this episode is the Christian teaching that the Jewish people are the people of God. From there, with assistance of other Bible verses and historical events, we can start to form particular eschatological views. So, the dispensational theological answer to who is Israel is that Israel is the physical, flesh and blood offspring of Abraham, through the line of Isaac and Jacob. But what did we read from Galatians and Romans? Those of faith are the sons of Abraham, and that the promise that depends on faith and rests on grace is guaranteed to all offspring of the faith, not of the flesh.
Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. Right on. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. Right on, left on. Father Abraham.
It's actually kind of funny to see such a biblically correct Sunday school song that really holds a key distinction to these understandings. But we tend to not notice that when we are learning through our dispensational theology, which is so common. And I might need to clarify that most churches and most Christians don't even need to teach this academically, in Sunday school or in some sort of classroom setting. It's the assumed in lay teaching throughout the church. This is why these next verses tend to be associated with this dispensational teaching, and then inform our political positions. First up, a common paraphrase is, I will bless those that bless you, and curse those that curse you. Or you may have heard it phrased this way when someone is using it to specifically back up military or monetary assistance to Israel. He said he would bless those that bless Israel and curse those that don't support Israel. I don't necessarily like making these paraphrases because it may seem like a straw man, but I have had more of these conversations than I can remember. I even used to have this same understanding before I properly understood Paul's distinctions in Galatians and Romans. Anyways, the blessings over those that bless Israel verse is commonly the evangelical way of not just defending the billions of dollars in foreign aid that is given through taxation and currency inflation, but completely excusing any criticism for the nation-state of Israel. This includes war crimes, but also many things that evangelicals are dead set against in domestic policy. Things like socialism, large gay pride parades, nationally subsidized abortions, and women in combat roles. These things that will supposedly incur God's wrath and judgment on the United States is excused or ignored because, they're God's people.
The blessing of blessing Israel brings a supernatural prosperity to the person, to the church, to the nation that truly blesses the Jewish people. The golden key to releasing God's supernatural prosperity on your life is found in this simple verse. I will bless those who bless you. Say that with me. I will bless those who bless you.
Let's look at that verse. What does it mean in light of our new understanding to who is Israel? And again, I say our new understanding, but this is how the apostles talked. We find this verse way back in Genesis 12. It's the third verse, but let's read verse 1 and 2 to get a good idea of the context. Now the Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those that bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So this promise to Abraham seems specifically just for Abraham and his offspring, right? We even see repetitions of this blessing in places like Genesis chapter 22. But there are actually some very cool messianic prophecies that are wrapped up in all of this. The blessing that will come from Abraham for all the families of the earth is Jesus. This is one reason why Matthew and Luke both include genealogies for Jesus. We've mentioned in other episodes the significance of showing Jesus in relation to King David. But here, it is important to note that he is also related to Abraham. If you'd like, review the typically overlooked genealogy of Jesus in the first chapter of Matthew.
Abraham had Isaac, Isaac he had Jacob, Jacob he had Judah and his kin. Well, then Perez and Zerah came from Judah's woman Tamar. Perez he brought Hezron up and then came.
Yep, that's right. That's the genealogy sung by Andrew Peterson. It's called Matthew's Begats. And spoiler alert, it ends with Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. But this isn't the focus from dispensationalism. The Schofield's footnotes from his reference Bible shows his explanation of Genesis 12:3, while further explaining the Abrahamic covenant mentioned in Genesis 15:18. Schofield says, "It has invariably fared ill with the people who have persecuted the Jew, well with those who have protected him. The future will still more remarkably prove this principle." And people like John Hagee use it to push their megachurch and megabucks ministries with fearful rhetoric against Islamic nations and any ideas that Americans might have against unconditional military and monetary support to the nation-state of Israel. In Hagee's book, Final Dawn over Jerusalem, he makes this statement: "The man or nation that lifts a voice or hand against Israel invites the wrath of God." On one hand, this all seems to line up with the Bible verses that use similar language. But remember, all of this changes when we have a proper understanding of the question, who is Israel? When we do not understand who Israel is, we start rationalizing how Israel blesses the whole world through technology, or medical and weapons development, or that they are the lone protectors of the Middle East from becoming an Islamic empire. That's how I've heard it explained quite a few times. When we misunderstand who Israel is, we in turn misunderstand the blessing to all the families of the earth. And that really robs the listener of the gospel. But we have some other buzzwords here that further distract us when our faith and culture is more politically minded. I will make you a great nation. In the Old Testament, the nation of Israel reached great proportions. The depictions of Israel and Jerusalem under Solomon and David are great examples of their strength and wealth. But is that the same nation spoken of? Is that the nation state today? Remember those times we've gone over types and shadows? The way that archetypes and foreshadows in the Old Testament point us to Jesus. Peter understood it perfectly and understood what the nation of Israel means for us in the New Covenant. He knew it wasn't a blood relation thing, just as what we saw Paul teach in his letters. In 1 Peter 2:9, we see Peter teaching to Christians, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." This verse is very important because we see all of those ideas that we apply to the current nation state of Israel applied to believers in Christ. A chosen race, a nation, a people. So again, this helps us understand that Israel is a faith. Now the land verses. What about the land itself? Sometimes these promises mentioned not just a family lineage, but reference rivers and landmarks. Fundamental misunderstandings of who Israel is are also found in the land and heritage verses. Looking back on our verses of Israel as a faith, we can easily understand that Christ and salvation are what these promises are about. They're not about a disputed piece of land. Here in the New Covenant, the land is extremely important to our faith's history, but it is of no importance to our faith's future. And for our faith presently, I do find it important to be able to put aside these poor understandings of Israel's land and for God's people to acknowledge the atrocities that happen out there. The dispensational teachings of the land belonging to an ethno-state has absolutely become a stumbling block in the Christian church. We could debate if the land promises are still relevant today, and if we did, we might spend days and days going back and forth. What are the biblical borders? Did Abraham's descendants continue to live up to the requirements to keep the land? Does this still apply in the New Covenant? I'm not going to get into these details today, but my friend Adam Graham with No King But Christ put together a great article and video concerning some of these questions, and it's a great study. He graciously let me publish it on anarchochristian.com, and I will have the links to it in the show notes. But besides it being a deeper study than I think we can get into in this episode, I also find it irrelevant for the larger understanding that we are trying to see today. We are pondering the legitimate use of an Old Covenant land in a New Covenant context. Why are we looking to a physical land when Abraham was commended for knowing that it wasn't about a physical land? Hebrews 11, the great Hall of Faith passage that also gives us our definition of faith, tells us this about Abraham and the land in verses 8 through 10. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Today, we are looking for New Jerusalem, just as Abraham was. Be it literal and ordained to a spot on this earth or something more spiritual, it will be entirely created by God, without our help in prepping the land for him. Any objects from Old Testament events, people, and places, if found today, would be priceless and very significant. But I wouldn't elevate them to a status any higher than that. The Ark of the Covenant, stones from the first or second temple, the veil that was hung in the temple, Noah's Ark, any of the altars that were built throughout the Old Testament. None of these things have any kingdom purpose. Neither does the land they reside on. Just as what Abraham showed us, we are looking for the Jerusalem whose designer and builder is God. And we know this We practice this throughout the Bible. But there is this disconnect when it comes to Israel today. Israel's redemption from Egypt was type and shadow to our spiritual redemption. David's conquering of Goliath was type and shadow for Jesus' victory over sin, death, and the devil. The temple was type and shadow for the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. Why is everything from prior covenants a type and shadow to the spiritual work of God except for Israel? But from what we've already shown, we can see that Israel is one of these foreshadows too. We can see that there is a spiritual Israel. We can see that spiritual Israel is God's people, and they are neither Jew nor Greek. That is to say, Israel, true spiritual Israel, is made up of Jews and Greeks, but their ethnicity didn't qualify nor disqualify them from being part of God's people. All right, bringing this back around to the United States getting mixed up in all of this, there is another term that comes up in these discussions and research, and that is Zionism. Zion is a synonymous term in the Bible for Jerusalem. Zionism is a term that's cropped up since the late 1800s that is specifically about reestablishing the nation-state of Israel, which did eventually happen in 1948, as we've already noted. Because of events like the Holocaust and all of the conflicts that are still ongoing with the occupation of Israel, especially the arguing over the rightful owners of Jerusalem, the term is still very relevant today. So we see how the U.S. simultaneously positions itself as Israel's protector, allegedly in line with Genesis 12:3, but we also see this co-opting of the figurative language of God's land and people to really drive home this narrative that builds national pride and self-esteem. But none of it remains a consistent interpretation of the verses we've discussed. The U.S. is blessed because it protects Israel. The U.S. is blessed because it protects the church. The United States' national identity is Christian, like the church. These sorts of things lets the dispensational Christian randomly apply these types and blessings or curses to whoever and wherever they want. Middle Eastern politics today, war propaganda from the Civil War to the World Wars, American exceptionalism, westward expansion, and manifest destiny. I could keep going. But the point is, it's not consistent. And it's in these inconsistencies where our excuses and our apathy can remain. In a fortunate way, this topic falls right in line with our Sermon on the Mount series. Directly after the Beatitudes, Jesus makes this statement about his followers that states an allusion to Zion that all of his listeners would catch. Today we can see it too, and it will further strengthen our case for a spiritual Israel. Matthew 5:14-16, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all of the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." Zion also literally meant a mountain in Jerusalem. This city on a hill is a reference to it, and Jesus is stating that they would be the city on the hill, not that their relatives would literally live there, and not that the light from the city could be imported to another hill across the Atlantic Ocean. But that is the confusion American politicians have been doing for quite a while.
The past few days, when I've been at that window upstairs, I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. The phrase comes from John Winthrop, who wrote it to describe the America he imagined. What he imagined was important because he was an early pilgrim, an early freedom man. He journeyed here on what today we'd call a little wooden boat, and like the other pilgrims, he was looking for a home that would be free. I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it and see it still. And how stands the city on this winter night? More prosperous, more secure, and happier than it was 8 years ago. But more than that, after 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true on the granite ridge, and her glow is held steady no matter what storm. And she's still a beacon, still a magnet for all who must have freedom, for all the pilgrims from all the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home. We've done our part, and as I walk off into the city streets, a final word to the men and women of the Reagan Revolution, the men and women across America who for 8 years did the work that brought America back. My friends, we did it. We weren't just marking time, we made a difference. We made the city stronger, we made the city freer, and we left her in good hands. All in all, not bad. Not bad at all. And so, goodbye, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
So that was from Ronald Reagan's farewell address. I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. I've spoken of the shining city all my political life. In my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed. After 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true. This may be the most recognized, but it isn't the first time that the city on the hill reference was used politically. John Winthrop was the first governor of Massachusetts, and he used it way back in the 1600s. John F. Kennedy used it before Reagan when he told the Massachusetts legislature in 1961 that all branches of the government were the city on the hill and all eyes will be upon us.
During the last 60 days, I have been at the task of constructing an administration. It has been a long and deliberate process. Some have counseled greater speed. Others have counseled more expedient tests. But I have been guided by the standard John Winthrop set before his shipmates on the flagship Arabella 331 years ago, as they too faced the task of building a new government on a perilous frontier. We must always consider, he said, that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us. Today, the eyes of all people are truly upon us, and our governments in every branch, at every level, national, state, and local, must be as a city upon a hill, constructed and inhabited by men aware of their great trusts and their great responsibilities. For we are setting out upon a voyage in 1961.
This sort of confusion of the narrative isn't isolated to just this concept or even just politicians. It's actually a pretty bad habit in the church. I think in most cases, it's not an intentional abuse, but it does lead to excusing some terrible atrocities. Because whether we realize it or not, once we've solidified in our minds ourselves as saviors, our motivations as godly, and our strength benevolent, we can't even question ourselves, lest we be heretics and blasphemers to God's country on the hill. And more than that, this confusion doesn't proclaim the good news and promises of Christ to his people. Words that are supposed to bolster our hope and faith in Christ become a foundation of hope and faith in the state and its politicians. Again, none of this is to disparage any ethnicity or people group. The thing is, it's just not about a race other than the human race. We are all equally fallen and all equally in need of a Savior. Jew, Greek, Gentile, whatever your ancestry. A common but lazy counterargument to all this from the dispensationalist is to claim that this is replacement theology. Replacement theology is a real teaching, but you don't have to follow replacement theology if you're simply not a dispensationalist, as their counterargument suggests. Replacement theology teaches that the church has replaced Israel as God's people, the implication being that the church means non-Jew. The fundamental issue is that replacement theology still holds onto this issue of Israel as a race, just like the dispensationalists do. Israel being a faith means that there isn't a replacement. People of Jewish ethnicity are just as much eligible to be a part of the church as any other ethnicity. But the way I like to address it is, it can't be a replacement if Israel was always a faith. It's just that the faith, prior to the new covenant in Christ, was primarily found in the Jewish people. The analogy Paul uses of grafting in is very important here. It's most of Romans chapter 11, so I'm not going to read through it now, but if you're not familiar with it, Paul goes through a lot of detail to explain that there is an olive tree and the Gentiles have been grafted into it. Grafting, if you're not familiar, is where you cut off a branch and then connect another branch to that portion. Once the new branch is tied to the stump of the old branch, the new branch will then begin to grow with the tree. This is a great analogy for the way that the faith was primarily with the Jewish people, and now Gentiles are brought into it, which again backs up our message of a spiritual Israel. Gentiles are grafted into a faith, not an ethnicity. The branches that are cut off to allow the grafting in of the new branches are something else he deals with in this passage. It's part of a good message to Gentiles to not become self-absorbed and anti-Semitic. It also serves to further illustrate the verses we went over in Romans 9 that said, "Not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel." And in case anyone is not liking so many references to Paul, as if maybe this concept is only found with him, we have a couple of moments in the Gospels to throw in. In Matthew 3, when John the Baptist is confronted by the Pharisees and Sadducees, he tells them in verse 9, "And do not presume to say to yourselves, 'We have Abraham as our father.' For I tell you, God is able from these stones to raise up children for Abraham." John knew this isn't about being a son of Abraham in the flesh. And John 8 records a pretty heated exchange between Jesus and his listeners. He tells them in verse 37 through 39, "I know that you are offspring of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me because my word finds no place in you. I speak of what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have heard from your father." They answered him, "Abraham is our father." Jesus said to them, "If you were Abraham's children, you would be doing the works Abraham did." They are then further confused, and Jesus tells them they are the children of the devil. So even here, we have Jesus confirming that not all Israel is of Israel. Israel, true Israel, hears and believes Christ's words. And what else does this remind us of? The remnant. I will have a link to a past episode of the remnant in the show notes as well, because we simply do not have time to get into all of that today. In short, we see the concept of God preserving a small number of Israelites through the Old Testament. Paul in Romans 11 asks if God has rejected his people. By no means, he answers. He then reminds the reader that he is a physical descendant of Abraham, and asks if we remember Elijah's appeal to God against Israel because they have killed God's prophets, demolished the altars, and feels that he is the only one left that follows God. God tells Elijah that he has preserved a remnant of faithful to himself and have not become followers of Baal. Then Paul lets us know this incredible truth. So too, at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace. The fact that this remnant is chosen by grace and not a physical lineage should give us all encouragement. It adds to this understanding of Israel as a faith rather than an ethnicity or political boundary. So, as I'm wrapping up here, don't take my word for it. Look into these Bible verses. I'll have resources available in the show notes for more research. It's easy to see the confusion because of the sharing of the word Israel. But it is only our biblical illiteracy that continues that confusion. Dispensationalism that has been popularized by Schofield and John Hagee and is present in just about every church in America is simply a misunderstanding of terms and covenants. It may seem strange to talk so much about some deeper theology, but even without realizing it, this theology dictates so much of how we view Middle East politics. And while some people honestly believe it, others can use it to manipulate Christians for power and money. As I close this out, above all the issues I've mentioned, I want everyone to be encouraged. I don't want anyone to go away hating a politician nor a people group. We are where we find ourselves today, in need of a Savior. All of us, no matter your ancestry, and no matter the dirt you were born on. So, what did you think? Was this the first time you've encountered this way of looking at those passages? Were you already familiar and think I left anything out? Had you given up on trying to understand this sort of thing a long time ago, and whatever it is, you're okay with not caring one way or the other? Are you a dispensationalist and we can still be friends even though you think I'm completely wrong? I guess it's a good time to point out that a dispensationalist, or a dispy for short, doesn't always have to be of the sort to get their eschatology from Left Behind books or televangelist, believing that God is going to rapture us after the next blood moon eclipse that lands on some super mathematically complicated date that adds up to the name of some foreign leader that we are pretty sure is Magog this time, even though we got it wrong every decade in eclipse and global threat since the 1950s. No, there are some real steady dispensationalists out there, and if you're one of them that has made it this far, thanks for putting up with me. We may completely disagree on all this stuff, but I appreciate you listening. And feel free to send me all of your amillennial jokes because we have to be able to laugh at ourselves every once in a while. As always, I will have a ton of links for you in the show notes. Stuff I mentioned, but also some additional resources on dispensationalism and spiritual Israel. Don't forget to subscribe on the Anarcho-Christian podcast on whatever podcast you're using. If you're not sure where to find us, visit anarchochristian.com/subscribe. There you'll find links to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Android, Google Play, Spotify, and YouTube. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider letting us know by leaving a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, or wherever you catch the episodes. Also, like and share the episodes on Facebook or the other social media sites. You can support the show with a monthly donation through Patreon or Subscribestar, or a one-time donation through PayPal. You can visit us on those sites, or you can visit the Support the Show tab on anarchochristian.com. That will take you to a page where you'll find the links to Patreon, Subscribestar, and PayPal. So I think that's it for today. Grace and peace, no king but Christ.
He cried out to God, won't you help them to believe? This power is illusion, the need to rule is greed. Your love and your light is really all they need. It's really all we need.
Thank you for listening to the Anarcho-Christian Podcast. Subscribe to our email notifications at anarchochristian.com, like us on facebook.com/anarchochristian, and follow us on Twitter at anarchoxp. Subscribe to our podcast and YouTube to join us next time as we continue to evaluate the relationship between the Christian and the state. No king but Christ.
The blessing of blessing Israel brings a supernatural prosperity to the person, to the church, to the nation that truly blesses the Jewish people. The golden key to releasing God's supernatural prosperity on your life is found in this simple verse: I will bless those who bless you.
Father